Greetings, everyone. Hope all is well. This is Chris Dixon, and I am back with another episode and discussion here on the Tunnel Vision Podcast. Hope you all have been doing good and well these past few days. This is part two, continuing forward on Gnostic thoughts. The last particular episode and discussion, I pretty much went into the background of Gnosticism and its influence on early Christianity, and pretty much just touched base on, pretty much Gnosticism's, origins, its impact on various ancient cultures and civilizations and their way of thought. And of course, like I said, its impact on the early Christian thought. The Gnostics were the mystics of Christianity, so to speak, and their legacy pretty much became very suppressed, and eventually, it led to their persecutions and things of that nature. So of course, they had to go underground, to pretty much protect their legacy. And gratefully, in 1945, that's when their remaining manuscripts, the ones that did survive the book burnings carried out by the Roman Church, their remaining texts were found. So now we have, the information, that sheds light on early Christianity and early Christian thought. So Gnosticism, in my perspective, is very important to study and understand, not only because it sheds light on the earliest forms of Christianity, but it's definitely a very intriguing and enlightening system. A lot of, concepts that later day Western Christianity does not really talk about and emphasize on, the Gnostics did, so to speak. So part one, like I said, was, just going into the historical origins of Gnosticism and its cultural impact on other civilizations. All right. So this particular discussion is going to be, of course, part two, and I'm going to be talking about a very important personality within the Gnostic way of thought, and that is the goddess Sophia. All right. The goddess Sophia is the mother of who the Gnostics call in their mythology the demiurge or Yaldabaoth, pretty much this lesser subordinate deity in Gnostic mythology that pretty much created this particular physical world, the astral plane, the planets and things of that nature within the solar system. So pretty much the architect of this particular lower realm, so to speak, along with his particular helpers, the archons, in which he created himself. Because of course, Yaldabaoth is an androgynous entity, so he ended up self-creating these archons or petty rulers to help him build this particular existence. But he did not create the spiritual components and essence of this existence, nor did he create the spiritual essence of human beings or anything physical that he created, so to speak. The human spirit and human soul came from Sophia, okay? And that's what I'm going to talk about here real shortly. Going to continue to read from Gnosticism, A New Light on the Ancient Tradition of Inner Knowing by Stephen A. Holier. And I will be reading from chapter 4, and the title of it is Sophia, Gnostic Archetype of Feminine Wisdom. All right. The name Sophia in Greek, it means wisdom. Okay. So symbolically speaking, wisdom is, of course, mentioned in the wisdom books of the Bible, Proverbs, even in the book of Ecclesiasticus, which was not included in the later day Protestant Bible, but is considered to be a part of the Apocrypha. Sophia makes herself known in that particular book. But the principle of wisdom as we know it represents the divine feminine, okay? That's why the concept of the goddesses, not just Sophia, but it can be seen with the goddess Lilith, Kali, whatever female archetype you're studying, they all represent divine wisdom, okay? So in Gnostic mythology and Gnostic thought, Sophia is the representation of the wisdom of God, okay? So she's a very important personality, not just within Gnosticism, but within Christianity as a whole, okay? Because her persona is in the Bible portrayed as just being wisdom. When you deal with the Greek, her Greek name, is Sophia. So every time wisdom is mentioned in the Bible, is referring to Sophia, okay? It's just that, the patriarchal aspects of the Christian religion does not want to acknowledge the divine feminine, okay? So that's what separates the later day Christianity from the early Gnostic Christianity. Is the Gnostics, they paid homage to the divine feminine, okay, through Sophia. All right. So understanding Sophia is very important, okay, and that's what I'm getting ready to get into right now. Sophia, the greatest of exiles. The predicament of exile and alienation is not confined to humanity, nor does it originate at the human level. Long before there were men and women, long before there was a cosmos as we know it, a great drama of exile and return was played out in the story of the divine feminine, being named Sophia. Having resided in the lofty heights of the eternal fullness, in which the Gnostics called it the pleroma, in the embrace of her Aeonial spouse, she leaves her original habitat and descends into the realms of chaos and desperate alienation. From the Gnostic scriptures, we learn that Sophia is the youngest of the great beings who populate the fullness. As such, she is far removed from the primal light of the Father, who is the central and essential source of all. Sophia has seen a light in the distance that she thought might be the Father, but it was only that light reflected in the depths of the abyss. Seeking the light, she journeys farther and farther into the deceptive depths until she is at last stopped by a power known as the limit, or Horos. So in the Gnostic creation myth, and I actually posted the Ophite diagram that you can pull up in the description box of part 1. Okay, you have the realm of the eternal fullness, okay, known as the pleroma. And in Gnostic view, this is the realm where the true unknown God dwells at. Okay, so pretty much it's a divine hierarchy. Okay, the true divine hierarchy. And Sophia, originated within that divine hierarchy. But Sophia, she wanted to understand this divine hierarchy that she originated from in her own way. So what she did was she broke away from this particular hierarchy so that she can understand the true eternal Father, the true eternal Mother, the Christos, okay, and other divine concepts within that hierarchy. So she broke away from it in an attempt to create her own particular concept of this particular hierarchy. So because she broke away without her divine counterpart, okay, the masculine counterpart within that hierarchy can be seen as knowledge itself, okay. She broke away from it on her own, so she ended up impregnating her own self, and that is where she gave birth to Yaldabaoth, okay. And this cosmic mistake, it grows into something more than what it should have been, okay. But I'm going to get into that as I read forward. At this point, a strange division occurs within Sophia's nature. Her higher self, her essential core, becomes enlightened and mystically ascends back to the fullness, while her lower self remains in alienation. In virtually all Gnostic myths, an intimate relationship exists between the nature and condition of the human soul or spirit, on the other hand, and the transcosmic archetype on the other. Thus we understand that our own consciousness has emerged from a primordial wholeness and proceeded into alienation and chaos. Yet, even in our confused states, we still sense a connection, no matter how tenuous, with a higher transcendental self. Thus, like Sophia, we are split in two. Our human personality abides in confusion and alienation, while our eternal self partakes of wholeness and wisdom. The lower Sophia, whose name is Akamoth, an anagram of Hokmah, okay, the Hebrew name for wisdom, and the name Hokmah is connected to the Kabbalah, okay. struggles in her alienated condition. She grieves and rages. She sorrows and longs for her original estate. In her distress, she manifests or emanates powers that eventually condense into the building blocks of the material universe. Envisioned in antiquity as earth, water, fire, and air, she produces a hybrid form of consciousness, a lion-headed, monstrous being who becomes the demiurge, also known as Adalaboth or Yaldabaoth, Sackless, and Samuel, the artificer of the created world. Sophia's misbegotten offspring proceeds to design his own kingdom, which is composed of 7 spheres or planets, presided over by 7 rulers, archonets of time, who are the rulers of destiny and the jailers of spirits. Sophia in her lower selfhood remains can't pronounce that word, remains connected, I'll just say connected, in the 8th sphere, which is above the 7. The internal, or as some have called it, the ontological side of these mythological gems was always present in Gnostic thoughts. The church father Hippolytus, in his discussion of this myth, states that in the Gnostic system, the Sophia is called Pneuma, which means spirit, the demiurge soul. This and similar statements suggest that this mythology is applicable to the human psyche. The lower psychic nature, with its ego consciousness, is certainly a mental artificial par excellence, imposing its own order on life and reality. We organize our own cosmos or create our own reality, as some will have it, and at the same time impose our own flaws on it. The division of Sophia's being into lower and higher selves is reflected here. The human being's lower self, the psychological ego, appears as the demiurge, while the higher self or spiritual soul appears as Sophia. And that's what I explained in part 1, how the demiurge, this particular demiurge entity, is really the human ego. Okay, it's the lower self of our existence, okay, of our nature, okay, our human persona, so to speak. It's the part of us that wants us to believe that it's a real human and that's who we really are, which in actuality is not, okay? Who we really are is hidden within us, okay? Our soul, okay? And our soul is what's connected to the pleroma through Sophia, okay? Because the soul is a fragment of Sophia, all right? And of course, you know, Sophia stems from that original pleroma. So once you start to cultivate, you know, your true divine identity, that is when the ego starts to, you know, fight you more, okay? It wants to keep you, you know, human, all right? It wants to keep you connected to this mundane material realm, okay? It feeds on worry, stress, anxiety, depression. It keeps you overthinking about things, you know, pretty much just keeps you in a lower vibrational well-being, okay? That's what it feeds on, all right? So Sophia, you know, being connected to your higher self, you know, that's the part of your nature that you want to consistently stay tapped into, okay? Um, so the demiurge is not this particular entity that is up above you, ruling over you like a sky daddy. This particular entity is a part of your own psychology. Okay, so understanding, you know, the Gnostic thought and just the overall, um, and just the occult overall, you're understanding your own psychology and overall nature, right? And you're understanding how to rise above, the ego nature and connect to your true higher divinity, so to speak. So that's what you're doing, when you're doing your shadow work, when you're doing your meditations, okay? You're trying to bypass the human ego or the demiurge part of your psyche to connect with the higher self, okay? And that is where you start to tap into the gnosis, okay, that the Gnostics call knowledge, okay, and start to cultivate deeper eternal wisdom, okay, from within yourself. So that's the true work, okay, that you're doing in your spiritual development, so to speak. So very important to understand that, as it pertains to your own psychology, all right? Critics of the Gnostics have frequently alleged that Sophia's demiurge offspring is evil. An informed reading of the Gnostic scriptures reveals, however, that the chief characteristic of this entity is ignorance, not evil. The texts say repeatedly that he is unaware of anything above him. Thus, he is ignorant of his own mother's existence. This is somewhat of an advantage, however, because it allows Sophia to insert her own design into creation, which he believes he has made by himself. The created world thus becomes a mixture of the flawed work of the demiurge and the celestial wisdom and beauty of Sophia. The heresiological church father Irenaeus, describing the Gnostic view, writes that the artificer believed that he manufactured these things by himself, unaware that Sophia, Achamoth, worked through him. In addition to ignorance, the artificer is also filled with conceit and presumption. He believes that he is alone, or in his own words, that he is the only God and there is no other God above him. Sophia angrily contradicts him, saying that there are indeed other superior powers above him, and that he is but a minor figure within a greater scheme. The demiurge, however, keeps this information to himself and continues to let the creatures he reigns over believe that he is the true and only God. Once again, the ontological or intropsychic analogy holds true. The ego, or lower self or lesser self, is generally ignorant of the deeper powers within the collective unconsciousness or unconscious, to use Carl Jung's model. And the more the ego becomes alienated from the archetypal matrix from which it originates, the more it is likely to assume that it is the lone determining agency of its own existence. The egotism of the ego is thus the interior corollary of the arrogance of the artificer, so to speak. So as you can see, in mythological concepts, it's a big mess that took place. So Sophia, in order to redeem herself after all of this was done, she sent down her divine light sparks, as the Gnostics would call it, which would be the human soul, okay, as well as the spirit. So she infused these light sparks or this particular soul in the human being so that it can become spiritually conscious of itself, okay? And just overall instilling her essence within this universe, okay? That is how Sophia redeemed herself after all of this took place. So you can see or look at this physical existence that we're in as a carbon copy of what could have been or should have been a perfect world, or what Sophia was trying to create within herself, based on her understanding of the original Godhead. But as you can see, to a certain degree, she acted out of her own arrogance, as some Gnostic scholars will say, and she ended up creating this lesser entity, and this lesser entity builds this particular universe, okay? So humanity, as a whole, can be seen as the creation of the ego, okay? This is the ego as a whole, okay? So the true Gnostic work, or the work of the Gnostic, is to reconnect to the deeper spiritual aspects of this existence. And that is how they reconnect themselves back to the pleroma, okay? Is when they come into the awareness of their soul being the only real thing about themselves, okay? And just about existence as a whole, okay? So once you come into that understanding, that is when you start to, that's when you start to develop the gnosis that the Gnostics speak of. And that is when you begin your journey, okay, back home, okay, back to the pleroma, okay? You start to give the soul the knowledge that it needs to reawaken and get to know itself, okay? And it begins its process, okay, of going back to the pleroma, okay? When you make your transition, okay, the soul can go back, okay, to which it came. All right. So let's go into the return of the exile. The fall and exile of Sophia do not remain unnoticed. The divine inhabitants of the fullness, as well as the fullness itself, are distraught at her exile. Together they appeal to the ultimate Godhead, and he gives them a warrant for her redemption. A number of the high aeons of the fullness, including the Holy Spirit, the Christos, and Jesus, detained to become the outer manifestation of the Christos. And I'm speaking in symbolic terminology. Join forces in a mission of rescue. The powers of the fullness also pool their strengths and fill the rescuers with invincible light and, perspicacity. All right. The Christos appears to Sophia in the shape of a form stretched out on the transcosmic Tau cross. The vision of this cross blazing and radiating through the aeonial regions vitalizes Sophia and infuses into her tremendous longing for her celestial home and her divine bridegroom. Metaphysical and intrapsychic elements conjoin powerfully in this portion of the myth. The disturbance of the fullness and the happiness of the divine beings over Sophia's plight reveals the Gnostic awareness of a mystery. Not only does the exiled soul long for the fullness, but the divine beings also long for the return of the soul. So even within the true realm of eternal fullness, these particular higher beings are longing for the soul's return home. Okay, so the work is up to you. Okay, and your spiritual journey, as a conscious being, or becoming, what they would call, conscious. Okay, your conscious work, doing the shadow work and continuing to get to know your own soul. Okay, understanding, the Gnostic mythology, what went down prior to creation, understanding the soul's origin. Okay, once you understand these things, that's when you, like I said, you start to cultivate the gnosis. Okay, the soul starts to remember where it comes from. Okay, because in actuality, it's in a sleep state or a state of amnesia. Okay, being in the physical body. All right, because when the soul incarnated into the physical body, all right, it pretty much started to identify with the body. Okay, or your true self started to identify with the ego. Okay, and the ego pretty much became your full identity. Okay, putting the soul asleep. So now once you come into this awakening that you are not the body, you're not this human ego, but you are a divine entity in the physical body, that is when the true spiritual work comes into play. Okay, and it really becomes a challenge because now you have to keep yourself in a balanced state of mind, not fully ignoring your ego and its desires, but understanding how to balance it out. Okay, so that's the work that you're doing. Okay, let's see. Heaven is not complete until the exile has returned from the far country. Until then, the fullness is not truly full. The wholeness is not truly whole. It is no doubt psychologically significant that Sophia's first awakening from unconsciousness occurs through the archetypal symbol of the cross. In the process of individuation, the psyche is often prepared for the coming interior liberation by experiences of numinous symbols, mandala designs, and the like. Perhaps the conjunction of the horizontal and vertical bars of the cross even reminds the psyche / Sophia of the needed conjunction of the opposites. Slowly and laboriously, Sophia ascends towards the light of the fullness, traversing the 12 regions that she had transgressed in the literal sense of passed through, on her way down into chaos. To undo these transgressions, she utters 12 repentances or poetic statements which allow her to rise through the 12 gates, as they are sometimes called. Let's see. She cries out to the 12 powers and elaborate ritual supplications. Okay, skip over that part. Let's see. Okay, I'll skip over that. Thus ends the story of the faithful Sophia. From the glorious fullness she descended into alienation and chaos and was afflicted by the terrors of arrogance and ignorance. Having called out repeatedly in a mighty magical voice to the light, She was gifted with strength and satisfaction from her bridegroom. In this particular mythology, the Gnostics were referred to as Jesus. And led by his holy hand, she resumed her seats of wisdom in the kingdom of the mighty aeons. All right. In archetypal myths, all archetypal myths possess a timeless quality that makes them applicable to the concerns of any place and time. The story of Sophia, in particular, fixes in comprehensible forms the universal elements that join psychic and transcendental experiences, insights into the development, individuation of the individual psyche, into sociological issues, including the elevation and emancipation of women in society, and into theological and metaphysical ideas, can all be derived from the Sophianic myth. The story of Sophia follows, with slight modifications, the classical 4 stages of ancient Greek drama, namely agon or contest, pathos or defeat, theranos or lamentation, and theophania or the divinely accomplished solution or redemption. Consciousness is ever engaged in an aeonial contest with unconsciousness and suffers frequent defeat at the hands of its forces. Awareness of these defeats is crucial. Hence the emphasis on lamentation, exemplified here by the many repentances of Sophia. Last is the joyous mystery of redemption, in which a divine redeemer comes from outside the existential millennial. In Greek theater, this was the Deus ex machina. An actor playing the role of the god was lowered onto the stage from above. The predicament of the loss of wholeness, symbolized by Sophia's departure from the fullness, is the ever-present predicament of all beings, most particularly humans. All of us are in desperate need of the restoration of our wholeness through union with our innermost self, the glory dwelling through hidden within us. Like Sophia, we wander over the face of the earth, our glory degraded and prostituted, while through the aeonic regions descends to meet us the ever-coming one, our divine bridegroom, the Logos of the Most High God. Thus the Theophania, the divine resolution of the great drama, is ever here. All right. Let's see. Whence cometh Sophia? Although the figure of Sophia and the myth of her fall and redemption were undoubtedly publicized and poetically expanded by the Gnostics, they were not the product of 2nd or 3rd century thought. The Old Testament contains numerous references to the wisdom of God as a feminine hypostasis or emanation of God, existing before the creation of the world and mystically present in the visionary and intuitive experiences of prophets and sages. The Hebrew word for wisdom is chokmah, which during the Hellenistic period was translated into Greek as Sophia. An entire body of biblical literature is named the wisdom literature, quote unquote, and comprises such works as Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Ecclesiasticus, the Book of the Wisdom, and the Song of Songs. Some of these books were declared apocryphal by the Protestant reformers, but they were highly regarded in many quarters, both Catholic and Protestant. In many of the Old Testament wisdom books, Chokmah/Sophia speaks to the reader in the first person, as in a relatory discourse. She always appears as female, and she regularly declares that she participated with God in early cosmic acts of creation. Here is an example from the book of Proverbs, chapter 8, verses 22 through 24 and 27. The Lord possessed me from the beginning of his ways before his works of old. I was set up from everlasting, from the beginning or ever the earth was. When there was no depths, I was brought forth. When he prepared the heavens, I was there. When he set a compass upon the face of the depth. She also introduces herself in exalted terms in the book of Ecclesiasticus, chapter 24, verse 5, verses 7 through 10, and verse 14. I came out of the mouth of the Most High, and covered the earth as a cloud. I dwelt in high places, and my throne is a cloudy pillar. I alone compassed the circuit of the sky, and walked in the bottom of the deep, in the waves of the sea, and in all the earth, and in every people and nation. He created me from the beginning, before the world, and I shall never fail. The greatest Jewish theologian and philosopher to develop the biblical teachings concerning Sophia was undoubtedly Philo of Alexandria, at times known as Philo the Jew. Let's see. Let's skip over that. So even in of course, the wisdom books, Sophia, or the divine feminine, is highly referenced. Okay. Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Ecclesiasticus, okay, the book of wisdom, and the Song of Songs. All right. So as you can see, the divine feminine has always been present within the Godhead. Okay. It's just been, highly suppressed, due to, the later day patriarchal concept of religion. Okay. But gratefully, it's starting to, resurrect. Okay. The feminine principle within these systems are starting to resurface and come back, because it's supposed to happen. All right. Because balance is being restored in this existence, and within people, and it's continuing to take place on a day-by-day basis. That's why it's a lot of things chaotic that's going on all across the world. And it seems like it keeps getting worse and worse, but that's because it's a lot of cosmic change that's taking place, and it's your job and responsibility to adjust to it. Okay. Let's see. It is no exaggeration to say that Sophia is present in virtually all Gnostic literature. The majority of the Nag Hammadi scriptures contain references to the Sophia myth, some explicit, others implicit. Of the scriptures that were available prior to the discovery of the Nag Hammadi library, the chief one is undoubtedly Pistis Sophia, or Faithful Sophia, upon which the account of the fall and redemption of Sophia, given earlier in this chapter, is based. It is quite likely that a major part of the book was written by the great Gnostic teacher Valentinus, while additional passages may have been added by his disciples. It is the most complete account of the story of Sophia, surpassing in detail and poetic beauty all other works on this subject. Okay. Let's see. All right, so I'm gonna close it out with this. So, what became of Sophia? The Sophia tradition reached its greatest flowering at the hands of the Gnostics, particularly in the school of Valentinus. After the suppression of Gnosticism in the 3rd and 4th centuries, the Western Church subjected the figure of Sophia to deliberate neglect. The wisdom literature of the Old Testament was treated as if it referred to um, an abstract intellectual quality called wisdom, instead of to a personal divine being who is a hypostasis of the ultimate Godhead. The fact that, in addition to the wisdom literature, many other books of both the Old and the New Testaments contain references to Sophia was also conveniently ignored. These include Genesis, Exodus, the book of Job, the Gospels of Mark and John, many of St. Paul's letters, particularly 1 Corinthians and 1 Thessalonians, and the revelation of St. John the Divine. It is in the esoteric Judaism of the Kabbalah that one encounters a close approximation to Sophia in the greatly revered figure of the Shekinah, the feminine spiritual presence in the Sephirah, Malkuth. Present-day scholars like the late and great Gershom Scholem have referred to the Kabbalists as Jewish Gnostics, and thus it is not surprising that the Gnostic Sophia found a home in their midst. Roman Catholic Christendom experienced only one revival of the cult of Sophia. This came about in the 12th century through the agency of Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, the Cistercian abbot and mystic who wrote a lengthy mystical and poetic treatise based on the Song of Songs. Since the Roman Catholic Church had subsumed what was left of Sophia in the figure of the Virgin Mary, Bernard had a hard time distinguishing the mysterious Shulamite from the Madonna. His devotion to his vision of the figure of Sophia was nevertheless genuine and influential. Sophia also made her appearance in alchemy as well. One of the great documents relating to the alchemical Sophia is the celebrated treatise Aurora Consurgens, attributed by many authorities to St. Thomas Aquinas, the noted medieval doctor of the Church and father of Western theology. This outstanding work depicts the process of alchemical transformation as a gradual liberation of Sophia from her imprisonment in chaotic, confining materiality. Thereafter, it was not until the fresh, spiritual and intellectual breezes of the Renaissance began to blow over Europe, building eventually to the revolutionary fervor of the Protestant Reformation, that the figure of Sophia appeared once more to the people of the West. The German mystic Jacob Boehme, a post-Reformation figure, is a major import in European religious thought, wrote insightfully about Sophia. See chapter 11. I'll skip over that. Let's see. Let's see here. So even in the Catholic Church, they pay homage to Sophia as well, through the Virgin Mary, along with the Black Madonna. Okay, a very iconic concept that you all should look into as well. But even the Catholic Church, they pay homage to the divine feminine. All right. So, Sophia and the feminine principle, is still alive and well, okay, within the Christian paradigm. All right. So to close out, today as before, Sophia remains the great prototype of our exiled and alienated human condition. The term alien has taken on a new color in present day culture. The pseudo mythology of the television screen based on science fiction has defined alien for us as a usually menacing visitor from a distant planetary system. Even so, the image of the exile or the alien finds resonance in many minds and hearts. Not only is the phenomenon of exile prominently present in our world, but many who have never left the geography of their native land feel themselves as strangers, not only in a strange land, but in an alien world. To the non-Gnostic, alienation might resemble a pathology. To the Gnostic, the consciousness of alienness is a valuable asset. As Sophia fell into dark chaos, so our consciousness has fallen into obscurity and forlornness. And as Sophia was in due course rescued by the Supreme Messenger, so we also shall be rescued in fullness of our own time, and restored to our own inhabitant in the aeons of truth and love. Alright, so that's what I'm going to close out with. So as you all can see, Sophia or the feminine principle we call wisdom, is a very important concept within Gnostic thought and just overall Christianity, okay? So the works of, Sophia and, studying her mythology, will give you a good blueprint as well as a guide, so to speak, on pretty much how to get your soul back to its true eternal origins, okay? That's how important it is to develop, the gnosis that they're talking about, going within yourself and understanding your true inner divinity, okay? No longer looking for God, outside of yourself. Understand that God is in you, okay? And you're connected to this unseen presence, all right, directly. All you have to do is come into the awareness of what lies within you, okay? And that's what will get you, on the path of getting the soul back to the realm of wholeness, all right? So it's a very intriguing story, but very important to study and understand, all right? So that includes this particular episode, okay, part 2. Hope that you all enjoyed it. Like, subscribe to the YouTube channel, so that I can continue to reach more listeners and students. Continue to listen to the podcast, okay? Available on Spotify and all other major podcast platforms, okay? Ponder on both of these particular discussions, part 1 and part 2, okay? And I will talk to you all on the next discussion. Peace.